Ever since the former Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina was forced to flee, resulting in a power vacuum in the country of Bangladesh, images, videos and accounts are streaming of atrocities against the Hindu minority in the country of Bangladesh. Well, the army, now the custodian of all power till a promised interim government led by Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus takes oath, has been mysteriously missing in action. Law enforcement personnel are absconding, having come under retributive attack from vengeful protesters. And in the ensuing free-for-all, Hindu properties and places of worship and women have become prized meat for religious fanatics involved in wanton violence. Muhammad Yunus is, of course, busy ahead of his oath-taking ceremony. Harrowing videos have surfaced on social media that give an indication of the unfathomable cruelty of the violence being perpetrated against Hindu minorities. Amidst all of this, all eyes are on Joe Biden, Keir Starmer and global activists. United States President Joe Biden remains silent over this issue. Meanwhile, Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer passed a generic and a very passive comment that he was, quote-unquote, deeply saddened by the violence in Bangladesh, perhaps not even understanding what's going on in this part of the world. Well, at this hour of crisis, Hindu minorities in Bangladesh need all the support they can get. And yet, where are the global activists to address the issue with no comments from, well, Rihanna or Greta Thunberg? The big question is, when will the Paragons of freedom intervene, finally realizing that Hindu lives matter as well? We'll talk about this with our guest. Joining us on the show is Bazavina Sikri, former High Commissioner to Bangladesh. Mr. Gautam Mukherjee, senior journalist, joins us on the show as well. Major General A.K. Sivaj, former Chief of the Territorial Army, with us on the program as well. Mr. Sandeep Chachra, Executive Director of ActionAid Association, with us on the show as well. Last but not the least, Nikhil Chandwani, influencer and activist, is also with us on the show. He's, of course, renowned for rescuing people from across the border. His concern for the minority communities on social media, talk of legends. We'll get to talk to him and his perception of what's going on in Bangladesh as well in just a moment. But before that, let's try and understand the general atmosphere in Bangladesh from Bazavina Sikri, who's been in Bangladesh. She understands the nerve, the pulse of what's going on over there. Bazavina Sikri, I'll begin with you. Well, apart from what's happening with the Hindu minority in Bangladesh, let us also try and understand through you that Bangladesh, pretty much like India, is a complex conglomeration of units, Islamic organizations, clerics, so-called progressives, conservatives, and what have you that you may find in a country like Bangladesh. But in the midst of this, what's really going on is that everybody is taking advantage of what they think Bangladesh should look like and what Bangladesh should do. In this process, of course, Hindu minorities are being subjected to immense cruelties, proof of which, corroboration of which can be found replete on social media as well. In your understanding, ma'am, and this is not the first time something like this has happened in Bangladesh. A number of their former leaders have been executed. Even some people from the Awami, 20 people from the Awami party have been burnt alive, is what we are getting to know at this moment in time. How would you rate the situation, ma'am? And what does this also mean for India diplomatically? What should we be preparing for? We'll get to the military part of it when we take a question from General Sivaj. Ma'am?
Doing this show because really the focus on the Hindu community and the focus on the violence that is going on in a completely anarchic Bangladesh at the moment is just not getting enough attention. So I'm very glad that NewsX is focusing on this. The same BBC, the same Amnesty International, with every small event, they pass big judgments. And, the New York Times and the Washington Post, they pass very strange kind of words and judgment and supercilious views on India, on Bangladesh and others. But today, when hundreds of women among the Hindu community are being violated, are being raped, there's a genocidal attack on the Hindu community, and of course the Awami League leaders are also being totally attacked. I think it's really sad that the Western media, the world at large, you spoke about Joe Biden and Keir Starmer, are refusing to look at it. And I think Blinken has given one very bland statement. I think this shows that what has happened in Bangladesh is really a regime change operation which has been successful. I think this whole business of the students' movement and so on, this is just a cover. Rather, I would say that even now there are people from Bangladesh who are writing about it very quietly. They're not doing so openly, but they have written that, people forget, for example, that it is the Awami League and it is Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina who supported the students. And she abolished the quota 6 years ago. From 2018, there's been no quota because in 2018 there was a students' protest. They said now it's time to abolish the quota. She said okay, because the students are a very valuable part of the community in Bangladesh. They have played a very important part in the liberation war. So when students groups make a big demand, you accept it. But mysteriously, in June this year, there was a case filed in the High Court, and the High Court overturned the decision of the government and restored the quota. Now there are questions being asked, why did this happen? Who filed this case? Who was the judge? It seems to be part of a very big plan to use the students' protest for other purposes. And certainly when this happened with the High Court decision, Sheikh Hasina's government went to the Supreme Court and said, no, we want to go there. And on 21st July, the Supreme Court has given the decision. But in the meanwhile, because of violence, the Islami Chhatra Shibir, the student wing of the Jamaat-e-Islami, of the BNP, they all got into the act and they took over the entire movement. In fact, the Daily Star, which published a list on Sunday, 4 days ago, of the people who had died up to that point, there are much more now. He said 204 individuals had died in the week before that, and of them 53 were students. So this was the assessment then. But now it is very clear, as we have seen, that it's the Awami League and it's the army, the Jamaat-e-Islami wing. The Jamaat-e-Islami is embedded in the Bangladesh army. It has now become very clear. And it's they who have forced the Sheikh Hasina to flee. And now there's a complete free-for-all. Jamaat is putting their own people everywhere,
Absolutely,
including in the
ma'am.
army, including they've burnt all the police stations, they've looted weapons, they've released prisoners, they've destroyed records. So I think in the rural areas, there's complete anarchy. You're quite right. Awami League representatives are being completely looted to the extent that I think we have to see how are we going to draw attention to this? How are we going to point out? The government must point out to the world that this is a major violation. There is expectation that today when Mohammed Yunus becomes head of the interim government, everything will stop. But I don't think so. I think the Jamaat-e-Islami is going to present them with a fait accompli. That this is it, we are going to rule the country like this. And people are already talking about next elections. Believe you me, there are going to be no elections in Bangladesh for the next 3 or 6 years. But they're going to, be presenting this as though the Awami League has completely...
It's a cause of worry, ma'am. I completely agree with you. And General Sivac, you have to give us a sense of why, we should not believe that Bangladesh army is going to go the Pakistan way.
Absolutely. See, Vineet, unfortunately, what all actions have taken place in Bangladesh are a matter of concern to India. The point is, everyone is talking why the US is adopting this line that they are, in fact, supporting the people who have taken violence in their hand. They are not supporting a democratic government which has been totally taken out. The reason is simple as that. The biggest problem between the Bangladesh and US is the Saint Martin Island. Now, this is an island which is very important, which US wanted it to make a naval air base, which has been denied to Sheikh Hasina government because they are a nationalist. And at the same time, if you see the China, as far as China is concerned, they are very keen to get a foothold in Bangladesh if they have to dominate Bay of Bengal, because strategically it is so very well located and Chinese know it that they are vulnerable basically at the choke point. And so therefore they also wanted a sort of a base in Bangladesh, and which was again denied by Sheikh Hasina government. So it was basically the China as well as the US which has helped Jamaat-e-Islami. Because Jamaat-e-Islami, one must understand, is a pro-Pakistan, and they are the one which was fighting against basically the Mukti Bahini, and they were fighting along with the Pakistani army in 1971. So they were not interested in Bangladesh to get the independence. And the same Jamaat-e-Islami is now coming into power, because this is the irony of what's happening in Bangladesh. Now, 3-4 things are very important, Vineet, in Bangladesh. One is no doubt the Hindus are targeted. See, when Bangladesh got independence as a East Pakistan in 1947, they were 23% minority Hindu. They got reduced to 14% in 1971, and they are merely 7%. Where are the rest of them gone? Either they have been killed, or they have run away, or they have been converted. So the past track record of Bangladesh is also not very encouraging as far as Hindus are concerned. And this India Out campaign after Maldives started it in basically Bangladesh, started by the Khalida Zia, the BNP leader. So the point today is coming is the vulnerability of the Hindu community is a matter of concern to India, and the way they are vandalizing the temple. The second issue which is there is that, the people who are on the border area, there is the chances of now infiltration taking place, because the border between Bangladesh and India is about 4,000 kilometers. There is a riverine terrain where there is no fencing. And the youth which are radicalized, there are Rohingyas which are 10 lakhs sitting in Bangladesh. There is no control over them. They will now like to infiltrate in India. They have been already radicalized by ISI. So biggest concern to us is the illegal migration, which in this period can take from Bangladesh to India. And this is another point which we have to be very, very concerned. Third thing is that in case the Bangladesh remains in such a doldrum the way it is now, though everyone is trying to convey that army has taken over and it will be Mohammed Yunus will be a caretaker government commander. But what is happening on ground? The situation is not under control. Why the army is not controlling this cadre of Jamaat-e-Islami? It is free for all. The India is making noise. Now, unfortunately, Europe, as far as US is concerned, they are ready to comment on Bangladesh on their election. They never commented on Pakistan, which they know if the election was all fake and false. But here they are commenting because the reason is simple, that as Sheikh Hasina refused to give them St. Martin Island for making a naval base. And at the same time, China wasn't very happy because she is not ready to give bases to China either. So the point is, a nationalist leader which was taking care of Bangladesh for last 15 years. Remember, Vineet, I just take 1 minute more. The economy of Bangladesh is doing so extremely well in last 15 years that they basically foreign reserve has gone to $48 billion. Their main industry, textile, was doing extremely well. They were ready to come out from the poor country to a developing country. But this is what award you give to a leader which has governed you for 15 years.
Right,
it is
sir.
all orchestrated. It is not a student movement at all.
Right, sir. Let me bring in Mr. Chatra into this conversation as well. Mr. Chatra, if you look at our outlay and the way India has had its democratic nature, and its commitment to democracy by political leaders, which has also percolated into the armed forces. That is not something that you get to see in Pakistan as well as Bangladesh. But besides that, I was trying to sum up what General Sivach also said. I was trying to make a point is that there is a faction of Hindus in Bangladesh that find themselves completely exposed, vulnerable, volatile. Forget about the world, Mr. Chatra. What is India supposed to do for them at this point in time?
Vineet, it's good to, at the current conjuncture, thank you for having me, at the current conjuncture where Bangladesh is, it's good to analyze this from a few different vantage points. It's important to understand the issue. And that is what I will try and put here in the limited time that there is. Firstly, I think first on the student question and the youth question. There is a social euphoria, mostly among the youth. They sometimes even are calling it the second liberation or the rebirth of Bangladesh. And that's very strong in the country. I've been talking to a lot of people there. Youth, and having said that, there's a demographic question in Bangladesh. 28% of Bangladesh's population are between 15 to 29 years old. And obviously, a demographic dividend, aspirational dividend, places a whole, gifts the country with a whole range of aspirations. So that's there. But in these last years, if you look at it, precisely the last 5 years after the Ukraine war and the fallout that Bangladesh has gone through, and an economy which has been, in a sense, struggling, given that it was largely export-led economy at the back of garments and others, you see rising unemployment. 41% of the young people, that is Bangladesh statistics, 41% of Bangladeshi youth are what is in a category called NEET, not our Indian NEET, but not in education, not in employment, and not in training. 41%. So obviously, the frustrations had been rising, and for sure, this particular movement, which I will call students' movement, was at the back of such a social distress or crisis. High aspirations, falling economic situations, troublesome futures, and a space which was increasingly not theirs. The quota is just the spark of it. There were other demands. And the quota, incidentally, came from that very vantage point, the quota for children of freedom fighters, which sparked the movement. Now, obviously, as has been mentioned by other speakers, during these protest moments, regressive forces, few have been named here, have also joined in. Opposition forces have also joined in. This is one vantage point we must look at. The second vantage point we must look at is what about the Sheikh Hasina government? We cannot forget that in the first 10 years of her rule, as a country, and economically and socially, Bangladesh did well, as General Shivaj was speaking to it. The GDP picked up. It was an average GDP of 6 to 8%. Social progress indicators were very good and celebrated globally, whether it's health, whether it's education, whether it's gender. The foreign relations were good with the neighbors and more strategic as well. On the Rohingya question, let me put it, a very complex question of Rohingya refuge was handled quite adeptly and nicely by the Hasina government. That we must say that. Yeah. But having said it, in the last few years, the government and Democrats do have a tendency to turn into autocrats if not careful. And to your question on democracies and democratic trajectories, that danger is always there, ever present throughout the world. But in the last few years, there have been troubles at the back of economic distress, and the fact that, given the Ukraine crisis, they couldn't handle it well. But more than that, the government was increasingly turning what is called intolerant of dissent. And you see these across. You see this even before these protests, sort of hung out. Random arrests of human rights defenders, so many of them. Michael Chakma's name comes to mind, for instance. Disappearances. This famous secret prison called Ayona Ghar, which now has been discovered. So that has been going on, press freedoms and so on and so forth. And finally, I want to also say, as far as the last comment is concerned, the government failed to discern the social angst of the youth protest. And in as much as that, they went far, far more to call them all children of Razakars, children of people who actually associated with West Bengal in the West Pakistan in the 1971 Liberation War. So they went to that extreme. So the total misplaced. But it is pretty clear, and I want to say this, that this is a student-led protest for two reasons, and still continues. There is a glimmer of hope, and I'll come to that. Why? Number one, the reaction that they had to the minorities. So there have been killings of minorities. There have been, sort of vandalisms to places of worship of Hindus. But the reaction after the 5th, the human encirclement and chains which students are forming to protect Hindu houses, to protect religious places of worship, is a demonstration that the right-wing forces, fundamentalist forces, have not totally taken over the protest, which they tend to do. And secondly, the installation of the interim government itself.
Right, sir.
The composition of the interim government. But one last quick thing, but there are dangers that await. As it happens, and as history will tell you, Vinici, many of these hope-filled protests are hijacked eventually, and the social and economic challenges for Bangladesh continue. And furthermore, in this political vacuum where there has been a total, sort of rejection of the history of Awami League and its entire history of liberation, the dangers are that the consolidation of forces, regressive forces might happen. Consolidation of divisive forces, consolidation of reactionary forces might happen. And I think this is the huge task that awaits interim government. How do they steer this? How do they ensure that such a danger doesn't become a reality? I hope they have the necessary resources to do so. I'll stop here for the moment. Thank you.
All right, Gautam, your perception of what's happening over here. Let me take a leaf out of what Mr. Chatra also said. The consolidation of regressive forces is going to be a big concern for Bangladesh, Bangladeshis, and obviously her neighbors as well.
Well, Vineet, it's been just a couple of days, but the regressive forces are making tremendous progress. The BNP, supported by various Islamic radical groups are the ones who are rapidly taking charge. They have no time for the Awami League. They are killing them outright as far as possible. The fact that the Awami League was also, it reminds me of Hosni Mubarak before he was overthrown, was also very repressive when it comes to the opposition. And now it's their turn. It is a typical situation that is unfolding, and they are going hammer and tongs. As far as killing Hindus, well, this began in 1947. I belong to a family that migrated in 1947 or just before, and millions have been migrating. The demographics of Hinduism in Bangladesh has been decreasing ever since, accelerated after Bangladesh was formed, and it is no surprise. It happens in every Islamic country, at least in South Asia. It's happened in Pakistan. It happens wherever there is a Muslim majority. Out go the minorities. Afghanistan. So, if nobody's making a fuss about Hindus being slaughtered, I'm not surprised. They've been slaughtered now for 75 years, as far as Bangladesh is concerned. There is a sentiment in many Bengalis that Bangladesh are, similar people, culturally one and all that, but this is a chimera. They are not similar except in a very superficial manner. They have very different priorities, and they have deep resentments. If you look at the pre-independence era, it was the Hindus who were on top. They were the landlords, and the Muslims were the serfs. They haven't forgotten. And they are going step by step towards that.
Right.
Now, what else will happen? They will gradually realize, just as Maldives did, that they can't really, it's all right destroying Rabindranath Tagore's statue and everything to do with Indira Gandhi and everything to do with Hasina and the Awami League and the Bongo Bundu, but they will realize they can't do without India.
Right.
Their economy depends on us. Many other factors depend on us. And gradually, as this settles down, whoever happens to be, dominant, because I think the interim government is really a puppet. It is the army.
All right. Fair enough. Fair enough, Gautam. Let me quickly, we've run out of time. We've quickly, in fact, rope in Nikhil into this conversation as well. Nikhil, from what I know is that you've already been receiving distress messages on your social media from Hindu families who follow what you do when it comes to rescuing minorities from Pakistan. Is this also going to become the next project for you when it comes to saving Hindus in Bangladesh, and you perhaps get to know more what's happening with these Hindu families than anybody else? Because obviously, there is a gravitation in terms of what you have done for this community in Pakistan. So obviously, they're looking for help through you as well. What more can you tell us, and what can we do at this point in time, Nikhil?
The first thing that we need to know is there are over 700 documented cases of arson, destroyed and damaged homes, and even mass slaughter and destruction of temples. Every hour I am receiving messages and emails from the Bangladeshi Hindus. Even now, as I was on live right now, I received a message from somebody who said that he was a student protester and he was protesting against the former Prime Minister. But now he is in danger, his temples are getting destroyed. Many monuments, the Hindu monuments and properties are just smoked. They have just burnt it all down, and they are trying to make this country an Islamic Bangladesh. He is asking us to help him. He is asking us to rescue him, but right now all we can do is pray. And you know what we need? The biggest hypocrites that I am seeing right now is the New York Times. Like, this is what we were discussing as well a few minutes ago. The West is just not silent, and they are indirectly claiming that Hindus are getting attacked because of revenge. some superficial revenge is the reason that Hindus are getting attacked in Bangladesh, according to the New York Times.
Right.
And
No
they-
basis for this revenge. There is no basis for this revenge.
Absolutely. But the Western hypocrites, they ignore the victims of Islamic terror and they're blaming it on the oppression they are suffering to make the victim look like the oppressor. They are inverting reality and do it with big headlines, and they are pushing notification to the millions of people. Then, when the damage is done, they issue a small correction that no one notices, like NYT did. And by then, the message is internalized and accepted as truth by those who are reading the initial headline. And that's how the left Western global media is poisoning the mind of the next generation, and it's woke washing Islamic genociders. And this is what is happening right now all over the world. You go to UK, you go to US, you talk to the people over there, you talk to even the secular Hindus over there, and they have no idea what's going on in Bangladesh. And they are thinking that Hindus are the oppressors. And the leftist media, they are selectively amplifying all the narratives to fit the agenda, and they are often distorting the truth and misrepresenting the real victims. 2 days ago, I shared a post with a proper, well-researched, documented post on my Instagram talking about what's happening in Bangladesh. Meta took it down. Meta deleted my post. And my account is on restriction right now. So that's what the West is doing. So how can we offer any help online or from anywhere when people are trying to stop us from doing that? And the messages and the emails that we are receiving, we have nothing to do with it. Right now, we can't do anything about it because our voices are they are like silencing our voice. They are muting us right now. And the Western media's, approach to cover such atrocities, it's a bigger pattern of moral relativism and ideological manipulation. They're manipulating everybody right now. And they're constantly framing Islamist violence as a reaction to supposed injustice. They obscure the reality of radical extremism and its impact on the innocent lives. What happened on 7th October in Israel is it's the same thing that's happening in Bangladesh.
Oh.
It's all related. And the media is reacting in the exact same way. And there are no eyes anywhere. Everybody is blinded. And us as Hindus, we have a responsibility right now because the Hindus in Bangladesh, they look like us, they speak like us, and yes, they pray like us. They're humans, they are Hindus, and they were there for the past thousands of years. And right now, I don't know what to do. And I don't know how to offer help to them as well.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.